we're delighted that we've got this far in our work, progressing Time to Talk Next Steps in Scotland. There may be some people who joined us for a webinar, about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, certainly, or 1 year ago, feels like a long time. And at that point, we were talking about the programme Next Steps and how that had worked really, really well in England. And we were really talking to those on the webinar about how it might work in Scotland and to get some ideas. And I'm really delighted to say that since that time, we've taken forward all the ideas, suggestions that people had, and we've worked closely with the National Lottery, who've actually supported this project to give us an opportunity to trial this online support for young people in Scotland, and really focusing on hearing their voice, building confidence and supporting transitions. So today we're going to be talking through where we are intending to move, that our partners working together, and also how you can refer people and get involved in the project as we move forward. So the webinar is really about giving you that information, but also needing to talk to you about, have you got ideas, have you got things you want to share with us, some suggestions and ideas as we move forward. We're not spending time asking people to introduce themselves. There's too many people on the call, but what we thought might be quite helpful was if you wouldn't mind just in the chat, just putting your name and where you're from, because that might help the other participants understand who's on the call. So if you got a chance in the next few minutes, if you could just pop in the chat who you are and where you're from, and then it means that everybody can get a sense of who's on the call today. So that would be really helpful as well if you could do that for us. So we're going to move on to the next slide, which is just really about the presenters. We've got a number of people presenting because we've got a number of partners in the project. So I'm there, Elaine Torrance. You can see me second one down, but we've also got presenting today Alice McCall. Alice, I don't know whether you want to say hello. Hi.
Hi.
And wave. And we've got Billy Anderson from Children in Scotland. Hi, Billy.
Morning. Happy Monday, everybody.
And Susan Walls from Contact. Susan.
Morning,
Hi.
everybody.
Hi. And we've got Victoria Mason and Cleo as well with us. I'm not sure if she's with us or not, actually, because she's been struggling to join.
I'm here, Elaine. My camera isn't working, but I'm here. Hello.
Excellent. That's great. Well, that's good. That's a relief there. You managed to get on, so thanks for that. Okay. Okay, so that's us and the presenters today. If we move on to the next slide, is just a little bit about our organisation, which is the National Development Team for Inclusion. We're a not-for-profit organisation. We really work with people, work with people at the risk of exclusion due to age or disability, as you can see there, and to live the life they choose. We deliver a whole range of elements of development work. We do skills development, policy and organisational development, some consultancy and research and evaluation. And we're very, very keen. Our kind of main priority is to drive inclusion, to make sure people's voices are heard. We're very, very keen on co-producing programmes and resources, and we've been doing quite a bit already in this project already, which we'll hear about, celebrating what's possible, and very much about making changes and building self-determination. I see I've got a hand up, so I'll just take that, or is that just a... Anybody?
No, it was just to say that the chat function doesn't appear to be working. It's telling me I'm not a member of your chat, so if somebody wanted to have a look at that, just if you were wanting us to put our details in, it's not allowing me to do anything at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll have a look at that. I think the chat function has been working for the majority of people, because I've seen lots of people who've introduced themselves. So I'm not sure if it's your issue or whether there's something else going on. But sometimes we find that if you go out and come back in again, then that might help. So there's certainly a lot of people in that have managed to get onto the chat. So if you wanted to try that, that might help a little bit as well. So thanks for that. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Just a little bit about our partners. We're very much a partnership between the National Development Team for Inclusion, Children in Scotland and Contact, as we've just said. And we'll let Ian back in, who's got, and just a little bit about the aim of the pilot. You'll hear a lot more about this from the other presenters, but we're very much trying to determine the best models and support to offer timely information to young people with additional needs and parents and carers in Scotland as they transition into adulthood. So this is very much a trial, a pilot, to see how what we've been doing in England can be adapted and work in Scotland as we move forward. So very much learning, wanting to hear views, wanting to hear voices, and make sure that as we move this forward, we get something that meets the needs of Scotland in our area. So, so it's very much about making sure that that's covered. So I'm going to hand over now to Billy, who's going to talk a little bit about transitions in general, but also about children in Scotland and their role in the project. So over to you, Billy.
Thank you. Right, so Children in Scotland, for those who don't know anything at all about Children in Scotland, we're a national membership organisation, and where we give all children in Scotland an equal chance to flourish, and that's at the heart of everything that we do. And we bring together networks of people, including children, and working alongside children and young people themselves to make a difference across Scotland. Now, transitions, the definition you've got on the screen in front of you is from the Principles of Good Transitions 3, now on the third iteration of the principles, by ARC Scotland, on behalf of the Scottish Transitions Forum. And I think that this definition still holds strong to this day, and it's a definition that I really, really like. It actually acknowledges that transition is not just a single event. It actually unfolds over several years and involves significant emotional, physical, intellectual and physiological changes. And people assume greater autonomy across this time in many areas of their lives. And transition also impacts on the family. So it's just to set out that kind of definition of what we're meaning when we're talking about transitions in terms of the pilot. We've got a number of excellent organisations and individuals who support children's transitions in Scotland, and we've got a new transitions bill underway. But we've been talking about this for a very, very long time in Scotland. Found this slide when I was preparing, and it was from 2016 SCLD Transitions Conference, where at the time Scottish Transitions Forum was saying we've been talking about this for 30 years, and that was at that point. So 36 years later, we're still asking the question, why are young people with additional support needs still not experiencing good transitions in a more regular way? I know from my own experience that working in transitions for around 20 years, I'm still having the same conversations with children and families and professionals about what needs to be done. So is it some nice straight lines? So is it, apart from the obvious resourcing issues around transition, there's still a kind of dominant approach or dominant thought process about transitions that sees it as being a kind of linear process with nice timelines and things to be done at certain points with a nice positive destination at the end. But I think everybody in this call, we all know that it's not like that. It actually looks more like this. Transitions are messy. They're messy by nature, and they rarely tend to go in a straight line. They're usually experienced by people on a very personal level, but all of those people involved, young people, families, professionals. But we need to work in this space. We need to work in that area of chaos. We need to kind of slow things down and find young people's voices and their wishes and their worries and literally give them a bit of time to talk. So parents and carers will be in their own journey too, and it doesn't necessarily match the same journey that the young person's on. And people supporting young people will also have some conflicting timelines in transitions. When considering transition as a process of change, in its most simple form, it's useful to look at the personal transitions that people are going through. And this can sometimes help to identify or illuminate where each related person may be in terms of their thinking and feeling. A young person may be in a certain point in that transition curve or that change curve where their parent or carer is at a completely different place, and also so is the person supporting them. So there's a whole load of personal things going on throughout a transition. But what this really highlights, if we look at the process of change for a person, is how person-centred approaches are so important to come back to and actually work with in that messy middle section around transition. So back to the principles, the seven principles of good transitions. Time to Talk pilot will be an approach that firmly addresses Principle 1 about planning and decision making should be carried out in a person-centred way. The pilot will also address Principles 5 and 6 around parents and carers needing support and information too, and Susan from Contact will be able to tell us a wee bit more about that later on. So I'm going to hand over now to Alice, who's going to take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. Really exciting to finally have got to this point today where we're literally in a position now to publicise how young people in Scotland and their parents and carers can access this pilot. It is a trial. It's something that we'll be doing over a period of a year until March 2023. And just to explain a bit more about the learning that I mentioned at the beginning. So Time to Talk and Time to Talk Next Steps that you'll see mentioned at the bottom of this slide were two programmes that we developed at NDTI in the pandemic, very much in response to the number of not only professionals but also families who were saying to us that there was nothing for their young people, and many young people with additional support needs were who perhaps had done a lot on independence and were really moving forward, had suddenly, as we know, got a complete dearth of engagement or had felt very stuck. So we developed this programme very much based on our experience of delivering Preparing for Adulthood, which was a programme we delivered at NDTI, commissioned by the Department of Education, and enabled us to pull in and lever in not only tools, person-centred planning tools, but also contacts and people we knew across England who could assist us in picking up, if you like, signposting and contacts for young people and their families following the support that we were able to provide. So it's a combination of different things, really. It's all about building support and building confidence, focusing on strengths. Many young people, pandemic or not, don't have aspirations, we've found. You know, they're very unclear about what's possible. And what we found through this very simple approach, which is person-centred and strength-based, is that that's the first and foremost and most important thing. And as Billy mentioned, sometimes that can differ from how parents and carers view possible ideas for the future. And so there's definitely something about hearing their voice that's key there. And I saw Una had asked about whether that's only people who use speech, as I understood it, to communicate. No, what we found is that by making this programme virtual, obviously as a result of the pandemic initially, young people engage through whatever format is best for them. So it could be through WhatsApp, it could be on the phone, it could be on Teams, it could be on Zoom. And you won't be surprised to hear that texting is a really popular way for some young people to communicate with us. And equally, PAs or parents and carers can be involved in supporting young people to engage with us. So it's all virtual, and there is that offer to parents and carers through Contact. And once a person has made a request for support, we'll look at their, and I'm speaking now about the English project, but we're really replicating this in Scotland with the help of Children in Scotland. We'll look at their request for support and against the criteria, which we'll come on to in a minute. And then we'll very often be assigning them a supporter, and those will be associates from Children in Scotland. And the supporter will then hook up with that young person or their parent and carer or the professional who's made that request for support in whatever way is best for that family, for that young person, in order to follow up what they would like. They generally get 4 to 6 sessions with a supporter, and those usually are about a week apart. They can be very different. Sometimes young people prefer to have 20 minutes. They prefer to walk around while they're talking. We really do tailor it very much to a young person's preference to make sure that they, above all, they engage and enjoy getting this kind of very personalised support. And it's all about tapping into what they like. So this next picture is of Mark. And Mark's a young person who came through the Time to Talk project that we ran initially. And he is, well, he's probably 18 now. He was 17 when his mum requested support for him. Very, very high level of anxiety. When Mark first met, or when his mum first met his supporter, Jackie, Mark was under the table. He didn't want to interact or be seen. And he was very, very nervous about making contact with anybody out in terms of support. He spent long hours in his bedroom, and his mum described herself as being at the end of her tether, or not tether, but more at a low ebb. Both of them were living in temporary accommodation, and there was a real sort of sense of how stuck the family felt. And Mark himself was someone who'd been bullied very much at school. He'd been excluded and hadn't been in education for 2 years before March 2020, which is obviously when we were able to set up this project. So it was a big ask to engage with him, and that's partly why we wanted to just hold up this case study, because what Jackie, his supporter, was able to do was initially talk to his mum using Teams, I think, or Zoom, and Mark, as I say, wasn't visible. What Jackie did was just listen to mum chat about Mark a bit, what he was doing. He wasn't doing very much, but just a bit more about him. And she spotted in the background, this is just an example of the way that this sort of programme, and I'm sure lots of other work that people are doing it in this way to engage young people, can work well. She spotted a rabbit, a rabbit run in the background, or something elaborate behind the mum that she asked about, and it turned out to be his passion were his rabbits. And he has 2 rabbits, and he has created the most fantastic run for them in their very small living space. So Jackie asked about that, and Mark's mum was actually not very well informed about the details of the run, and subsequently Mark started to interrupt his mum from under the table and to interject and to say important features that she was missing out about the run. And that's where, you know, the way in was for Jackie. So what Jackie was able to do was then say, you know, how about next week we meet up and you maybe film the run, you know, and teach me about this. And I mean, long story short, that was really the way in for Mark. He began to engage much more, enjoying his sessions. He actually cleared a space in his bedroom to meet every week. He tidied his room. He wanted to speak, and he spoke to the camera, to Jackie. And what was really important was he set his own goals, so they weren't set by anyone else. He established some goals that he wanted to try, and one of them was to walk out of the house. That was something he hadn't done for 2 years. And this young man decided that having a photo of him by the letterbox was going to be the biggest way that he could kind of reach a goal. And he sent this photograph to Jackie. So in terms of the impact, which we'll come on to in a minute, this programme made a huge shift in not just his life, but his mum's as well. And it's a nice case study to tell you about, because it helps us see just how the timing was right, and this young man was able to engage with the programme. So just before we go on to the evidence base, which my colleague Victoria is going to speak about, what we're looking at here really is a pilot. So 45 young people in this age group, 16 to 25, all with additional support needs, will be able to receive support between August 2022 and December 2022. They don't need to have a diagnosis, they don't need to have a label, they need to have additional needs that present as a barrier for them in this area of transition. Certainly in England, we've found that it's key to kind of ensure that young people who are experiencing high levels of anxiety are able to request support from us. We're not a clinical service, but what we do, you know, we're not a mental health service, but this way of working very often can be fundamental to building those blocks for enabling young people to move forward. And again, just to mention that it's for young people who are not in receipt of other services on their next steps. So they might be in school, they might be doing other things, but actually nobody's really talking to them about transition. And this, as Billy described it, that huge, I love that diagram that you've got, which is really just like a huge knot of string, but it's not linear, and we need to get to meet young people to find out where they're at in that journey before we move forward. So co-production is really key, and we've had some fantastic meetings with young people in Scotland, and today will be a really great chance for us to hear some of your views as well. And we've got parents and carers in Scotland also, I suppose, advising us on whether this is the right way to do it in Scotland. That's the purpose of the co-production stage. And there are sort of 3 clear phases to the project. So we've got a period where we've been doing engagement and co-production, as I say, with different groups. And then we want to make sure that we're really well set up for the delivery. And in a minute, Billy will say a bit more at the end of the presentation about how Children in Scotland is set up to take requests for support now that the programme is better informed, if you like, by some of the learning that we've had in Scotland. There were a couple of things I wanted to say about co-production. We want to, one of the slight dangers is that learning happens only at certain stages, and so what we want to do is have a learning group, and the learning group will include people who are willing and able to join us, not just at the beginning to set up the evaluation framework, but also to meet a few key points in the project so that we can share how it's going, but also they can help advise us on recommendations, because that final stage is key. NDTI's role really is to evaluate this project, set it up, but then let partners run it and then evaluate it. And it's that learning that we really want to make sure informs the transition work that Billy mentioned nationally. So I'm just going to introduce Victoria, who's really responsible for that kind of evaluation evidence base. Can I bring you in, Victoria? Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Apologies, my camera isn't working, but you can hear me, so, and you'll be able to see the slides, so that's the most important thing. There we go. Thank you. Right, so thank you, Alice. As Alice said, I'm Victoria, or Vicky, and I'm a research and evaluation manager at NDTI. I think it's really important to highlight that although I work at NDTI and the same organisation as Alice and Elaine, our department is entirely separate from the delivery. So we're as objective as an independent organisation, evaluation organisation would be. So at NDTI, our evaluation is influenced by a realist approach, where we aim to explore and understand what works for who, in what context and why. A key element of this approach is the co-production, as Alice mentioned. So we co-produce the vision for change and the outcomes framework right at the start of a project. Our co-production of these guiding tools brings together those who will be delivering a programme alongside representatives from the group or groups who will be receiving the support or services. So within this pilot, that will be young people, parents, families and carers alongside individuals from Children in Scotland and Contact. And this is going to be happening tomorrow. Within the session tomorrow, we will be thinking about the vision for the pilot, what outcomes we want to see as a result of the pilot, and how we will capture evidence towards these outcomes to share the learning and influence change within Scotland.
Vicky, can I just interrupt you? Sorry, but I can still see the 12-month pilot slide, and I know that's the one I was hoping to show. It's quite small though, it's quite difficult for people to see.
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why that's happened. Apologies. I've taken control and it's done its own thing. Is that?
I can see it now, and it shows the vision for change, which I think is just important to go with what you're saying.
Yeah. Is it an all right size now?
It's small for me. You might need to just explain the footsteps and the.
Yeah, bear with me. Oh, apologies. I am having real problems with Teams this morning.
I don't think it'll get any bigger. It's just small
No,
to look at on the
okey-dokey.
slide.
So, yeah, on the slide there's a vision for change, which is the brightly coloured document at the bottom, and it was just to illustrate what the document will look like. So this is for Time to Talk Next Steps South of the Border, and it's got the vision and what we're going to do to help reach the vision, what we're going to see that's changing, and the impact of the steps that are on there. So tomorrow in the session we will be creating one of these for the pilot. Okay, so working in this way, co-producing these items from the outset allows our evaluations to capture rich and detailed data in a way that doesn't create a burden to those involved, and that's really important. And it helps a project develop and grow as we share the learning along the way, as well as influencing change more broadly with our wider outputs. So, for example, the evaluation of Time to Talk in 2020 and 2021 garnered evidence about what worked well for those receiving support from the programme and those delivering it. Through a series of surveys, interviews and reflections, we learned that Time to Talk was quick and easy to access for young people, which was welcomed and hugely beneficial. It had a flexible approach to delivery and the purpose of the support, which allowed young people and their supporters to take time to develop a relationship and trust one another. It saw young people as assets and utilised a mixture of tools and resources as appropriate to the individual young person and their family to ensure they got what they needed from the programme. In turn, the programme greatly benefited young people, as for example, on average, their levels of anxiety reduced, they felt less lonely and had more ideas about the future as a result of their involvement. The majority also thought the support offered by Time to Talk was either good or very good. In addition to the impact on young people, Time to Talk also had an impact on family members. The quotes on the slide highlight just two areas where the impact was felt by the support offered. As a parent, you do need someone to rally for you, to give you some credence with these people. They don't take you seriously, but Time to Talk has given us that. It was like taking off a cement overcoat the first time I talked. I hadn't realised how heavy the load, even though I see a therapist. Knowing that there was someone with the knowledge and experience who had reached out to us was a huge comfort. Also someone who is willing to talk to me as a parent, to hear me and not judge. The evaluation of Time to Talk also drew learning from professionals who either requested support for a young person or who became aware of the programme as a result of the support offered. This data emphasised the importance of the programme in filling a gap in the provision of statutory service, as this quote highlights. We have no experience of other activities or services that support this much needed area of life. Time to Talk did not complement anything else he was receiving, as he has not had any support for planning his future. This is the only support he has had, and it has been invaluable. As well as the things that worked well in Time to Talk, the evaluation also captured what areas of the programme could be improved. This included things such as support being available to more young people, with more sessions available to each of them, guided by bespoke action plans, the development of a peer support network for young people to meet with and share with others, and the availability of support for parents and carers. This learning was drawn together into a final evaluation report, for which there is a link on the slide if you'd like to read more, and led to the creation of Time to Talk Next Steps South of the Border, where the delivery team incorporated the learning from Time to Talk, including the increased availability of support, the creation of a peer support network, and workshops for parents and carers and families delivered by Contact. This newly designed programme went on to receive funding from the National Lottery Community Fund based on the evidence provided in the evaluation of Time to Talk. It is my hope that the co-production co-produced evaluation of Time to Talk Next Steps in Scotland will capture equally strong evidence that will both inform the future of the programme and influence the wider landscape for young people and family across Scotland. Thank you. I think, am I handing over to Billy now? Yeah, great, thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, so I think the evidence that's been gathered from the Time to Talk evaluation in England, we were really keen to see if those improvements could be made in the Scottish pilot. So we also wanted to look at what evidence was existing in Scotland, as well as doing the co-production work. So there's some recent evidence here, really wordy slides, I apologise, but I've highlighted some parts in there from the Divergent Influencers, who are a group of young people who work alongside ARC Scotland. And some of the things highlighted in their recent report about experience of young people with additional support needs leaving school was that transition had an impact on young people's mental health. Young people aren't generally asked simple questions. People tended to go straight into the what do you want to do next, where do you want to be at, what are you doing with your future, instead of asking simple things, but what do you like to do? What do you love to do? What's your passion? So again, highlighting that person-centered approach is really important for young people. Self-awareness and self-management of diagnoses and health conditions are important for young people when it comes to being independent, and that's sometimes overlooked as well in that kind of relentless search for this positive destination in those straight lines we mentioned earlier. People taking more responsibility and control, highly rated by the young people in terms of them becoming more independent. And that can be control at the very lowest level, but also a very important level for young people. It could be something as simple as just opening their own bank account for the first time. Could be a huge step for them on the way towards building confidence, to have conversations, to be independent. The availability of support there was highlighted as well, but more young people needed more support, and that support could come from anybody. It could be a family member or professional or somebody else that they trusted. Children in Scotland's inclusion ambassadors have did a bit of work recently around supporting effective transitions. What worked well when leaving school was the question posed, and they said feeling valued, listened to and included in decisions. That element of voice there again. Having time to discuss their options or next steps and what needed to be done to make that happen. What does not work well when leaving school? They highlighted that they wanted more support with practical life skills. Stop jumping to the what you want to do next. What's that positive destination? What are the things that you need to do now to help you on your road towards wherever it is you're going? Felt they needed more broader experiences about what they would be interested in, not just what people thought they might be interested in or where there was a gap. And the current conversations around transitions and preparing to leave school felt little more than a tick box exercise. Young people are jaded with it, they can see through it, and they're not having it, basically. In our own co-production sessions for Time to Talk Next Steps Scotland, again, some really person-centred approaches really highlighted here as the thing that's missing for people. Transitions is relationship and trust-based work. We need to ask the proper questions and listen, actively listen. Ask about the small things, again, the same as what the Divergent Influencer said. Ask us about the small things, and what this person said was don't go straight into the future abyss. Interestingly, someone raised as well about this element of toxic positivity, about everybody saying, oh, it'll be fine, we'll get there, come on, you're doing great. This kind of, they'd seen that really as being quite toxic. Let's talk about and acknowledge the negatives too. Let's not dwell on the negatives, but really, I think in particular for Scottish young people, there's an appetite to actually, let's talk about the bad stuff as well and acknowledge that, and let's not be too toxic about the positive stuff, but let's keep it real a wee bit for us. There's allowing confidence building and improved stamina and resilience, and that was a quote directly from a young person, that's what the Time to Talk programme in England had did for her. Improved stamina and resilience, which I thought was a fascinating comment. Having good information at the right time and in the right way, which is what we anticipate that the associates who are delivering the direct work will be able to do. Setting personalised goals that Alice mentioned before, and getting to know us and our fears, taking on independence is daunting and scary. Really, really easy to forget that it's a scary thing for everybody that's involved in that. And sometimes just somebody independent there that's just going to stop that whole kind of world spinning for them for a second and just acknowledge these things is the first step on the way to becoming independent or wherever it is they're going. Just to answer that question, Julie, in the chat there, what is an ASN? It's an additional support need. Apologies for that acronym. So it really, really highlights, I think, all of these bits of consultation work. The person-centred approach is so important when working in transitions. It's remembering the person in the middle of that and where they are in their journey. So what's Children in Scotland's role in the pilot? So it's Children in Scotland's role to take direct requests for support for the programme for young people, from young people or from supporters of those young people. And they will be allocated an associate or a supporter, as it was framed in England, for 6 one-to-one online sessions, or via phone or via WhatsApp, each lasting up to 1 hour, depending on what the young person wants and needs. As mentioned there, can be delivered in a variety of ways: text, email, telephone, WhatsApp, whatever the young person needs. Allocating an associate who will be focusing on strengths, anxiety reduction, confidence building and well-being as a baseline before even looking into the targets and outcomes we're looking at in the session tomorrow. I think any good person-centred approach will focus on these things: strengths, anxiety reduction, confidence building, well-being. We're using a range of person-centred thinking, planning tools and approaches, and we have 6 associates that we've recruited who are well experienced in delivering person-centred programmes and using person-centred tools and approaches. And we'll be having an induction session for those associates at the end of June to again bring everybody together, share experiences and knowledge and skills, and make sure that we get this right for the young people. Associates can also research and signpost to identified opportunities for and with young people. So if young people are saying, well, what's in my area? What is there here for me to do? The associate can do that. They can do the research work, and they can help signpost for the young person as well. And the associates can also refer parents and carers to contact Susan's organisation for advice and guidance. So if we are identifying there's maybe some parents there that could do a bit of support, then we will be referring to contact. And I'm going to stop presenting and hand over to Susan just to explain a wee bit more about that.
Thanks, Billy. Good morning, everyone. My name's Susan Walls, and I lead in Contact for our services in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. Contact is a UK charity supporting families with disabled children. And we started as a group of parents well over 40 years ago, so we understand that life with a disabled child brings unique challenges. And our vision is that families will feel valued, strong and confident, and able to make the decisions that are right for them. So our aims are about trying to provide the best possible guidance and information for families, try to bring them together to support each other, and we aim to get them to contribute to research, campaigns, volunteering and fundraising. So Contact's work, as Billy said, will complement Children in Scotland's work. The associates will signpost parent carers to Contact if the parents feel they need support and would like additional support. And we will do that with parents' consent, and we'll pass the information on to our information officer, Donna Tomlin, who will receive the completed consent form. So it'll all be down to what the parents actually want and need, and all done with consent. We will be supporting parents through a dedicated listening ear service for up to 10 parents. And this will be a one-to-one telephone appointment, or whatever way parents would actually prefer that. It could be that they want an online Zoom call. It might even be that they want to do it in person, but whatever their needs are. So this will be done with a parent advisor who will be there for the reassurance and practical and emotional support, and just giving parents that time to talk about transition from their point of view, what it's like for them. And they will have a dedicated hour booked in at their convenience, so that they have that time and space just to sit and chat to someone. Parents can also get in touch themselves but everything will be done with their consent, and we'll also be ensuring that their views are considered throughout the project, particularly in the learning and evaluation. So just like Billy said, parents are on their journey too, and it isn't always the same as their young persons. And the principles of good transitions, the third iteration, outlines in principles 5 and 6, having access to information is imperative for parents, young people. And over the last 4 to 5 years, there have been quite a number of resources developed in consultation with parents and families. And these are just a few of them that I've actually got on the slide there for you. We worked for 2 years with parents, providing support to them and information, but also working with them in a co-production way in order to produce a resource that was developed by parents for parents called Talking About Tomorrow. And it's a website packed full of information that just gives parents that initial sort of information that they need and the kind of questions they need to be asking, and then some information and signposting to other organisations and resources that can help them. We also did a lot of consultation with parents and carers and Scottish Government, produced an online resource as well called Advice and Support Guidance, Supporting Disabled Children, Young People and Their Families. Families and carers need that support, and we understand that. And Scottish Transition Forum has got a huge information on their website with lots of different resources and information that can be so useful. And actually having that support and advocacy from the start for parents is vital as well. So we will be signposting the parents to national and local organisations that could be supporting them, but we'll also be supporting them to the resources we have and the workshops that we run around transitions. And it could be that they just need to talk about the planning around transitions, or it could be about the legal side of things, guardianship and powers of attorney, wills and trusts, whatever it is the parents actually want and need. We'll be there listening to them and working with them to make sure that their journey through this pilot project is as smooth and as productive as possible. So I'll hand back to Billy.
Thank you, Susan. So what's the next steps then for the pilot project? So requests for support can be made by young people or on their behalf by a supporter. Only one form would be required for that. From the July the 1st, we'll be accepting requests for support, or until the pilot reaches capacity. We mentioned earlier that there was 45 people being supported by the project, so whichever comes first. Places will be allocated throughout August, again, or until service reaches capacity, and use the following criteria that's been mentioned a couple of times already. So young people between the ages of 16 and 25, additional needs which present as barriers towards transition. They're not in receipt of other services or next steps. Young person is informed and wants to be engaged, and the young person has no or limited aspirations for the future. These are the broad criteria that we'll be using as selection for allocation of places. To make a request for support, we've had a dedicated web page in the Children in Scotland website where the request for support forms will be on there. At the moment, if you visit that page, it'll say where the forms are, that they will be open and live from July the 1st. But if anyone wants any questions answered or wants to log an expression of interest in making a request for support, you can email the email address there, timetotalk@childreninScotland.org.uk. And if anyone wants to be kept informed about the pilot or to share views on transition with NDTI and partners, you can complete the short form, which there is a link to in this presentation. And I think that's us came to the end of our kind of formal presentation, and I'll open it up for some questions and answers. I see there's been loads of stuff happening in chat that I've not been able to see, but thank you so much everyone for listening. Alice, do you want to take over and facilitate the Q&A?
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, thank you. I've just seen a few questions in the chat that we can pick up. So Siobhan was asking about the selection process for the pilot, and will there be a waiting list? So the selection process is there's an allocation group. So NDTI and partners will be meeting together in August to look at the requests for support that have come in, and we'll be using those criteria that Billy's just listed. The waiting list is something that we have used in England and been able to, I mean, I don't think it'd be any surprise to you that not some young people request support and then change their mind or indeed forget. So, you know, we do need to make sure that we're always keeping enough people informed about where they're at, should there be, but we would definitely keep, if you like, a waiting list. We try and be as quick as we can to go back to every single individual in England to say, thank you, we definitely would like to, we can give you advice on where to go if we can't support you ourselves. So the approach is very proactive, if you like. There was another question which you asked Una around education staff and reaching, I'm not sure if it was a question, but it related to young people who've been excluded or are not engaged in education. We have found in England certainly that there's a high majority of young people who access the service who are neurodiverse, have experienced some real difficulties in mainstream education and are not in any receipt of any services and would be described as neat in terms of the sort of gap. Before 16, certainly they may have missed, a bit like Mark, the case study that we gave. Did you capture any other questions, Elaine? I was just looking.
I captured a few. So I think Una asked, I think there was a point about making sure that that you know, people who don't have a functioning voice and how we can support that that group of people. So Alice, I don't know whether you want to pick up on that point yet a little bit more.
Yeah, so at NDTI we frequently work with people with all sorts of different approaches to communication, if you like, and we've been able to use a range of different tools to enable people who do not use speech to engage in the programme. When it comes to complex needs, we're very often working with PAs or parents and carers to enable somebody to access their sessions. And we have Easy Read. We adapt our materials and our sessions as much as possible to make sure that people with complex needs can access them. And Billy, I'm assuming certainly in the work we're about to do with the associates at Children in Scotland, that's one of the reasons we wanted your organisation to partner with us, because we know you have a similar approach.
Yeah, absolutely, Alice. We currently deliver the My Rights, My Say service via Children in Scotland, which is about giving young people their voice in educational decisions, basically young people going through tribunal, for example. So it's we meet with young people face to face, but we can also work with them online, and it's been predominantly online for the last couple of years. But we absolutely adapt and adjust all our different approaches. We can bring in people to help us with the approach as well, if need be. It can be working with a parent, it can be working with a support member of staff from their school. So whatever it takes to allow that young person's voice to be heard, we can absolutely adapt to make sure that happens. And if we can't, we'll be open and honest about that from the get-go and no pretend that we can as well, which I think is important.
Thanks. I think we had a question from John asking about the geographical basis for allocation and any plans to allocate on a geographical spread. I know we've had a lot of conversation about that in the project. So again, I don't know whether Alice or Billy want to pick that question up.
I can pick that up, Alice, if that's okay. So the geographical spread is a nationwide service. We want to take referrals from across the country, as well as the criteria that you saw mentioned there with the kind of 5 bullet points. We're also looking at a kind of rural and urban split between the referrals as well, and we'll be utilising the SIMD as well to look at areas of high poverty and low poverty as well. So there'll be a real kind of mixture of rural, urban, but also looking at areas in need in terms of deprivation as well, so that there will be some kind of further criteria that will help guide our decision making in terms of allocation of places.
Hopefully that picks that point up. Thanks for that, Billy. I'm kind of hoping I'm catching most of the questions, but if there's ones that you have that we haven't covered, please put your hand up. But I think, Una, you also asked about, will young people have the option to exclude parents and carers from their discussions with agreed confidentiality capacity rules? So just a question about the process for that would be helpful to explain that. So Alice, I don't know if you've got examples of that from the Time to Talk work that's already happened.
Yeah, so the systems that we set up and we've shared with children in Scotland, so they'll be very similar, is that every young person completes a consent form, and that consent form is also something that we talk through with each young person, and we have an easy read version. We ensure that they've understood the safeguarding issues around confidentiality, and that they can invite a parent carer to be part of the session if they want to. It's their session. It probably won't be a surprise to many people on the call that that can be automatically what young people choose, is to have a parent carer, but equally one of the areas that might be quite useful for independence is encouraging them to start to have some sessions without their parent carer there. So we work quite sensitively with parents and carers as well to ensure that there's an understanding of the service, so they're not just sort of not knowing what their young person's getting involved with. If anything, we can do phone calls or separate communication to make sure they know what their young person engaged in, if that person chooses to not have their parent carer there, which might be really important and a useful way for them to move forward.
Okay, that picks up.
There's one other question about the case study from Fiona. So yeah. Fiona, your point was, you know, mark someone who'd benefit from longer term support, and I think it's a good call actually, because this is a short-term service. It's not pretending to be a long-term service. However, what it can do, as Billy pointed out, is walk alongside people to help them research what is available to them. And just to highlight that ARC Scotland's work on principles to transition includes the introduction of Compass, which is a really important development in terms of digitally trying to capture feedback from families in 10 local authorities in Scotland around transition and what's out there. So we are working quite closely with colleagues in Scotland to make sure that we're enabling the people who are in receipt of support to you know, be the catalyst, but then following that to ensure that they are connected, not just perhaps signposts, but possibly walking alongside them to find out exactly what might be useful for them in their next steps. And I don't know, Billy, if you want to mention any more on that, because it's a key area really in terms of impact.
Sorry, Alice, I was reading questions there. I was formulating answers to other questions, sorry.
It was really just about longer term, so we're short term. And your point about signposting or walking alongside a family to make sure, and I say family because sometimes it is parents and carers who are desperately searching for information, and just as Susan said, that's key. We would be making sure that we're looking at longer term solutions for young people, not just saying, great, glad you enjoyed it, bye.
Yeah, but I think it is, and I'm looking at some of the other questions there about what's happening after the 6 sessions and what happens next, and this is a kind of social kind of sticking plaster for an issue. I think it's important to say as well, though, there is something quite powerful about having short, focused, up to 6 sessions. I've worked in other programs where there's maybe about 10 sessions given to someone, and I think that to be really quite focused in terms of what goals people are setting and what they want to get out of that support is quite important. We're not here to fix everything, but we're not a service that's going to make everything better for people. But what we can do is put people on the right path to where they want to go. And I think in terms of kind of creating something that's going to create a dependence on a service is quite a good thing as well, because I think there is real power in having a short kind of sharp input that's going to help people with their thinking to move on. We're not going to pretend that this is going to fix everything, and it isn't a long-term programme, but everything that we do will be to set people in the right direction, whether that's a young person or a parent or carer. So I think it's just being realistic about what can be achieved through the pilot, but also I think the important thing is we make sure that we harness all of the evidence and information that comes from this pilot to make sure that we can put something in place that is a bit more sustainable and a bit longer lasting for people to access going forward.
I think as well, I think the evidence from down south has been that there's a few points about peer support. I think that's really important as well. And there's been a number of young people who've actually been supporting each other and indeed are looking to support people into the future. And I think that's a real strength of this programme. It's not about professionals or supporters continuing to support. It's actually about building the confidence base of young people themselves that can actually do that work themselves with other people. And what we would really like to harness out of this pilot is that evidence base that says that in Scotland that's a really good approach, and we can continue to, with out of the 45 young people, I'm sure we will have some who are very, very keen to be peer supporters of other groups, and that we can build that and really build that as we move forward in Scotland. So I think that's a real, that's why I'm excited by the project and the programme, is to really try and get and build that confidence and the voice to young people so they can support and help each other. So I think that will be a real key part of our evidence and learning approach, I'm sure. So that's really helpful to hear that chat as well as about that importance of that area. I'm just picking up, I know we said we'd finish about 11, so I think we should sort of close, but is there any final questions? Fiona's been putting some comments in about transitions and autistic people, and I think there was a number of people with autism actually who benefited from this programme, from programme Up to Date, and I'm sure will continue to do so. So absolutely needing to recognise how we support those people as well as the others, other people who will come forward, I'm sure, for support through the programme. I'm just wondering if there's any final comments that either my colleagues want to make, or if there's any final questions that anybody wants to pick up. John, you're saying, how has it been publicised? How do folk know it exists? We'll pick that question up, and then Alice, and then we will probably need to close, and we will make the recording available. Alice?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. I suppose we are publicising it. What we've done is partners and NDTI have spoken at a number of events, but we would really appreciate your help to help publicise this programme. And at the very beginning, Elaine mentioned a form that you can fill in to just, oh no, sorry, it was on Billy's slide. And I'm wondering, Rebecca, if you could put that in the chat, because that's the one that we want you to keep in touch with us. I've already collared Ian Wilson from ILF as a friend of the project, who's definitely got all sorts of contacts and ideas, I suppose, to contribute. And I think that's really important at this stage. We are learning. We want to make sure we keep learning. I'm very grateful to our partners for that backbone of work that they'll be doing, and we'll make sure that we're listening all the time and bringing information into that final, we say report, but to be honest, what we're hoping for as well as that is young people delivering some presentations about the project themselves to forums that you're working at. We've got some key leads here today who might be able to help us bring, if you like, the findings to some different forum and networks. So thank you very much for attending today, everybody. It's been brilliant to share this information.